Who is Scott Abbott? That's a great question. Talking about yourself is really awkward, isn't it? What's fun to do here in Philly? You live here, don't you? Okay, you want to get to work. I can tell. I'm interrupting you. My name is Scott Abbott, and this is Franchise Manager. Got into business for myself when I was 16, and one of my first passions, which is actually fishing. I do a lot of freshwater fishing all across Canada and in the United States, and I sold fishing tackle, if you can believe it or not, from 16 till about 23, right across Canada. Big pike, big muskie fishing tackle. And I started doing like fishing seminars, and I started doing my own little fishing magazine called Angling Masters. Was a writer in that, totally entrepreneurial, but with a passion. Somewhere along the way, decided that franchising was the fit for me, and that's where we started. When I say we, my co-founder and I, Chad Jones, started a painting franchise system called 5-Star Painting in 2004. And actually out of Canada, we stormed the United States over the next several years, and it grew it to become one of the largest painting companies in North America. And yeah, that whole experience just kind of created all kinds of moments of truth for me around what I wanted to do. Franchising was, I loved the business model, but deciding that I wanted to build something much larger than just one brand, and wanting to build a platform of brands, taking what we learned from building that business to multiple other brands. And in 2021, we decided to take the plunge and partner with private equity and get to work at buying companies and growing them, all in home services. The emotional element that's involved in making decisions around, as business partners, around doing something like transforming your business from being, at the time, we owned Bath Solutions, which is a bathroom remodeling brand. We were part owners of a brand called Joe Homebuyer, which is a real estate franchise system. And we had ProNexus, which was a services arm that supplied a lot of brands with kind of technology and call center work. I think we always had our vision around building something larger, right? But how do you do that? And so up until 2021, that was very much done organically. You sell more franchises, you partner with another brand, you launch another brand. And that is a very lengthy process. You know, building companies from scratch is super challenging. And so we had some really important conversations. Chad and I, I've known him since he was 12. We grew up together in Winnipeg. And so I've known him forever. We built 5-Star Painting together, and we were battle tested. We've literally gone through, the Great Recession of 2020 or 2009 and 2010. And so having lived through that kind of stuff, you get really good at having the hard conversations. And we both are, the kind of people that are very, very passionate about franchising and business and entrepreneurship. And there's one of the words we use to describe this is that Chad and I will often get into something called vigorous debate, which is we're kind of like brothers that way. Like we literally will go at it with each other. And in some cases it can be awkward because we're in an office environment that's very open, and we'll be like in the upstairs area, and then everyone's hearing us. I'm not gonna say fight, vigorously debate something. But like we're so good with each other on this stuff that it always ends well, right? It always ends well because we're all well-intended. And this discussion point of, do we want to build something organically where Chad and I are the only owners, we are in full control, we have full flexibility, or do we want to build something much larger, faster? And a few things for me hit home. One is from 2015 when we sold 5-Star Painting until 2021, so 6 years, we just didn't have the same energy around building a business. So when you take chips off the table and you now have the financial wherewithal to no longer work and consider retirement as an option, you think about everything differently. And what kind of energy we put into the business, how many hours a day did we work? And like I went to Europe for 3 months with my kids and just lived there, and he's traveling all over the place, and we were enjoying life, which is very rewarding, but it wasn't getting us necessarily to our goals that we wanted to achieve. And so the debate really was, well, we could keep doing this and enjoy this lifestyle and have a lifestyle company, or we could build something that's a legacy, it's lasting, and it is so much bigger than anything else we've ever dreamed of, right? And that debate took months of conversations, and ultimately making the commitment and partnering with private equity was very intentional. Now, in saying all of that, if I were to step back, that was the decision point, which I can see very clearly in my mind right now in Chad's office at the whiteboard, where we're both vigorously debating whether or not we wanted to partner with private equity, and ultimately we came to an agreement. If I were to step back, though, the vision was always there, just how do we get there? And that's where ProNexus came into play. We always knew that we wanted to have this engine that ultimately would drive the success of any home service brand. And you can think of it this way, and it's actually the genesis of five-star painting. What is the customer experience like for most homeowners when they try and engage with any home service brand? What does it look like? What does Mrs. Homeowner have to do to get a hold of a painter? Well, in 2004, when we started five-star painting, I called 1,000 painting companies over the course of 6 months, and only 20% answered their phones. They'd spend thousands of dollars on advertising, and they didn't handle the most primary element. Can you just answer the phone and make sure that you're talking to somebody? And so we created ProNexus with this in mind. If we solved the problem that almost every homeowner experiences, we would have a brand that could be built and become lasting and be very successful. And so that was the first part of what we were doing. But next, ProNexus also gives us the opportunity to work with brands that I don't own, master the customer experience in that field, understand what are the driving factors of success in that area, and get us into a position where we get to know brands at a very personal level. In fact, I attend many conferences of brands I don't own in the context of ProNexus. And so it became almost this opportunity for us to look at brands we wanted to acquire. In fact, our first deal was a customer of ProNexus for 8 years. And I look at that once again, like it was intentional. We knew what we were building would help us in serving our franchisees and their customer experience, but also give us exposure to brands that we may want to acquire one day. And so that strategy, which was hatched years ago, was just starting to come to fruition now, where now ProNexus supplies 45 or 50 brands and home services. It's the premier customer experience solution for home service brands. And we get to know great companies that we may at one point want to acquire. And so it all came together in 2021, and in the course of 18 months we bought 5 businesses. And if you ever bought a company, buying one is like super challenging. Buying 5 in 18 months is mind-blowing. It's been great. We absolutely love what we're doing and are very passionate about it, and very intentional about it as well. It's called Drive. We're driven, we're real, we're innovative, we're vital to our franchisees, and we're very enthusiastic. These are like the 5 things that every person in our organization has to embody, otherwise they're not a fit. And in the same way, when I attract franchisees, I look for that same fit. And then so in the same way, when I look to buy a company, I'm looking for that same fit. And if it's not there, then we just move on, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's other things we look for, obviously. Unit economics is probably the top of mind, and it should be for anyone. Does a franchisee make money? Does that business scale? What does it look like year 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and so on? And can we add innovation in some way to that brand that can add some value? Every single time you buy a company, every franchisee of the entire system is, in some cases, terrified, many cases frightened, and at best they're neutral. Like that's kind of like the 3 different feelings they have, right? And so if you look at it from their lens, they're asking right away, what's going to change in my world, and is it going to change better or worse? And so if I feel like I can bring and add value to that brand immediately and show wins along the way, whether it be technology or a customer experience solution or franchise development and expansion and so forth, then we know that we're going to create momentum around the validation that can exist in that brand, so that we can actually grow the brand more aggressively. If we buy a company, in many cases that company is already having to manage all that on their own. So when I say all that, they're doing all their marketing on their own, they're doing all their IT, they're doing all their friend dev, all their accounting, their finance. Like the brand president or the owner or founder, in many cases, is juggling a whole bunch of responsibilities. So once someone joins 5-Star, they literally remove from their responsibilities every pillar of the business outside of operations. So it means for, let's say, a president who was spending 30% of his time in operations before and the rest on everything else, he's now spending 100% of his time on the operations. So franchisees now immediately get an immediate boost to operational support. The next thing to consider is that in some brands, the support, and it was actually mentioned today at a conference we were at, the support is best had from franchisees, not necessarily from the franchisor. So yes, early on in the life of a franchisee, they need to be coached and trained, and there's programs that do that, and there's different kind of gateways that they pass through to know that they're actually making progress in their business. But one of the most powerful things, and it's in my view, it's our obligation as a franchisor, is to create community. And if you do really good at creating community and a culture that creates community, then the franchisees are supporting each other, and you can actually optimize the business around peer groups, which it does so much for you if you think about this, right? And so it puts you in an environment where now 8, 9 franchisees in the same brand are now meeting weekly, if not monthly, to talk about the business, and they have franchisees who have experienced that, growing from $0 to $2 million, franchisees who are brand new, franchisees who are in the middle of the business. And now this support, this burden, if you want to call it that, I call it an opportunity, or the blessing that comes from being part of a franchise community, is actually shared by 7, 8, or 9 other franchisees. So that means your operational staff, they're supporting clearly, and V for Vital, we have to be very responsive to all of our franchisees' requests. But you're letting actually the people who can teach them better than anyone else, your best franchisees, do that. And so it's an art form. You're pulling together franchisee support, removing distractions from the operations team by specializing in those other areas. So we just did our annual convention. It just happened last week. We had all of our brands together in person in Orlando. It's the first time that all the brands came together. The entire executive team, all the managers, everyone's nervous about this exact issue. Franchisee talks from brand A talks to brand B, and they're communicating, they're comparing notes. Are they feeling like this person gets more attention than I do? And so once again, you're speaking to culture. It's like my job. It's like literally all I do is building culture and communicating culture. And if I were to talk to anyone in my position that was building a platform, I'd make the analogy of when you are a young father, your responsibility to a child is very different, right? You are raising the child and teaching them values directly, and you are providing for the child all kinds of things. At some point in time, though, you become a grandfather. If you think about grandfathers, what do? They just tell stories. That's all grandfathers do. And they tell, in some cases, the same story way too many times. That is like my responsibility is I'm now becoming more of a grandfather. I'm taking the values of the organization and I'm embodying them into a story, and I'm telling that story over and over and over again to large audiences of our team and our franchisees. What's my objective? I'm trying to have people, because they need to hear things, if people say 8, 9, 10 times, it's like 50 times. They need to hear the same things over and over again. They need to hear it more than once for multiple reasons. One, so they remember it, but 2, that they know you're serious. It's one thing just to say something to somebody. It's another thing to reinforce that over and over again so they know that what you said was actually, you meant it. So at the convention, what am I doing? I'm taking a franchisee one at a time in small groups, in large groups, and I'm storytelling. And I'm taking the values and I'm putting them into the stories and I'm communicating them over and over again. So that is the one responsibility I have as a leader in the organization: creating culture, storytell, and help them embrace it. When that happens, and this came from this convention, time and time again, franchisees came up to me afterwards saying how nervous they were about being at the event, and now how relieved they are that they're part of 5-Star and how this has been such an amazing experience. Now, second, how do you make sure your team members do their jobs, stay focused on the right things, and don't put too much attention in different areas? Well, you can do that through structure, right? And so, as an example, probably the most in-home services, the most common thing that comes up is, I need leads. I need more leads for my business, right? It's not like restaurants where people just walk in the door. We need to be out there attracting people to our concept. And so we structurally have a system where you've got brand managers, brand manager assistants, and so forth at every brand. That's their 100% of their job, is just working on generating leads or getting more leads for that brand. So that way we're addressing, in my view, and I'd say the franchisees would say the same thing, the most important thing: how do you help me make the phone ring? Then behind all of that, you've got specialists that sit in certain areas, and there's endless things: pay-per-click, social advertising, SEO, and so forth, that are doing amazing work on that brand's responsibility that is really being held accountable by that brand manager, brand director. So that's how you structurally and also as a leader create this understanding within the system that, in fact, I'm getting more. That stop focusing on the pie being this small and getting a small slice. How do we actually enlarge it by taking this expertise and adding value across all the brands?